I typically begin with a kind of a background story, but because of how many people we have on the call, I'm going to go ahead and just do the abbreviated version. If anybody wants the long version, certainly can listen to one of the other videos, one of the earlier videos where I've sometimes gone as far as a half hour to 45 minutes into my background. But a little bit about me: I started in finance. I grew up in Portland, Maine, went to college in Maryland, met my wife there. And that's how I ended up in the Mid-Atlantic. And I started off in banking at TD Bank and retail banking, moved to TD Ameritrade for brokerage, then Merrill Lynch and asset management, and then lastly, T. Rowe Price, working with small business owners in a day in, day out basis. And I've always been entrepreneurial, so I think that the finance world has pretty set in its ways. There's a lot of bureaucracy and it doesn't tailor towards my needs. And I had moved from place to place to place thinking that the next one might be the one that fixes that. But the whole time, I think I was just geared towards business ownership. And so while I was very steeped in a career in finance, and I didn't think I was going to leave T. Rowe Price because I really did enjoy that job. I liked it a lot. I jumped in head first after 6 months of opening the Harrisburg store. And so I fully intended to stay semi-absentee or absentee and keep my job in finance. I had several securities licenses, and I was very deep into that career, and it was more established. I'm sure my in-laws probably liked that idea better. And so when I took over the Harrisburg store, I had some pretty specific ideas what I wanted to do with the industry. I spent a lot of time at my desk reverse engineering kind of the problems that our industry has. And at the time, Yelp was still relevant. And I would just read the reviews and see if there was a better way. And I think a lot of great businesses are built out of filling voids in the consumer space. And that's exactly what we tried to do. And so our second location opened in a small town called Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, a town of 6,000 people. And then our third store was in Mount Prospect, Illinois, which is a suburb of the Chicago area. And that's where really the processes that we put in place were developed, because it was impossible for me to be in the Chicago area on a regular basis. So very early on, ingrained in the DNA of this business was absentee ownership. And third-party processes and third-party apps and SOPs became a pretty standard thing for us in terms of how to delegate, how to operate, and how to run the business without having to be there on a regular basis. So one of the biggest things for us was managing overhead, managing the customer's expectations, treating their property with respect, and educating them on their product or their vehicle, which at the end of the day was a big problem in our space, because the industry seemed to have been built on ignorance and hoping that you could get one past the consumer. And so we took a very deliberate opposite approach, and we felt as though that helped convert sales at a higher rate, because you were coming from a place of cold sale, warm sale versus cold sale. We teamed up with Fred Defco after we opened store number 10. We should have 20 corporate stores by the end of the year, but it was around 10 that I felt that the best way to actually make a dent in this industry was to franchise. If this was ever about money for me, franchising would not have been the way to go. I could have continued to open corporate stores and be the sole shareholder and be a dictator on top of my little empire and distributed all the free cash flow to myself. But what was more interesting to me was to actually make a change in the industry, because the greater kind of pattern and development has been to do this multi-care unit, this all of the above approach, where we start doing other services that are not really what made the industry in the first place. And so we kind of wanted to get back to our roots in that sense. And so I'm going to just open it up to Q&A at this point, because that's pretty much our background in a nutshell. And We do have Discovery Day every third Thursday of every month. People come into the HQ and sit down and meet with us and see what we're about. And we do a site visit to one of the stores, and they're a really fun day. And that's where we really get into the secret sauce in terms of like really specific questions. But for this, I would like to keep it as macro as possible. I'm more than happy to answer specific questions, but that is really what Discovery Day is for. And this is more of just like the general Q&A. So I'll let Michael curate the questions, and we can probably go around a couple times.
Good. Thank you, Costa. Well, I'll move selfishly. Easiest for me to move left to right on my screen. Anyway, Jay and Breck, I know you're planning to come to our Discovery Day, and Costa's right. We spend about 5-6 hours answering questions and also going through all of the details. Do you have a question for Costa this morning?
Not really right now. We're coming up with several questions to have once we get up there and visit with y'all, and more of a face-to-face kind of thing. But right now, you've been taking care of us pretty good.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thanks. Shatoya, nice to have you join us. I'm not sure where you are today, either New York or Atlanta, but thank you for joining us. Do you have a question?
Again, I would echo their sentiment. I literally kept you like 30 minutes over the last call that we had, asking you a bunch of questions. So I really don't have that many. I just want to kind of put my hands on it and see it and feel in, kind of, in person to actually see how it goes. But I guess that's what Discovery Day is for, to actually get to be able to see everything. But yeah, and I'm in New York today, so.
Okay, the Big Apple. All right. Well, so we during Discovery Day, we actually do tour one of the shops. It's about a third of a mile away from the corporate office, so you'll get to see the techs actually service vehicles, which is I think fun to see. So anyway, John, you've come up next. John Conway, do you have a question for Costa?
I do not. I just received the FTD, so I'm working with Chris on that. So he invited me to the call to listen in. So no questions at this time.
Okay, good. David, you're up next. A question?
Yeah, good morning. Really my question, oh gosh, I'm not sure what filter my kids turned on.
That's okay. Looks like
let me turn that off real quick. Where is it? Good grief. Okay. Yep. Well, I was going to turn off my video. Sorry about that. Yeah, real quick, a couple of things. Costa, first of all, you mentioned that this is meant to be, owner absent or, just limited, the ownership is kind of absentee ownership. How did you go about finding a GM to run your stores? Because you're in Maryland and you're opening stores in Illinois, the Chicago area. How do you go about finding that person to make everything run?
Sure. Before I answer that question, I will say that I do think our model caters to both ends of the bell curve really well for owner operators and absentee owners, and then everything in between as well. Our industry has moved in a direction where it's taken a ton of liquidity for someone who may have been a territory manager for 20 years and saved up some money to be their own boss and be their own owner. So I do want to say that our model is great for those who want to participate in the business. For the absentee owners on the other end of the bell curve, because of the costs associated with our model, it's easy to get into multi-unit ownership, and getting to 3 locations is really important, because that's how you can have an established territory manager. And the way that we do our territory managers is a little bit different than some of the other competitors in our space, where they might be in an office for 4 days a week with 1 travel day. Our territory managers are in the stores every single day. They just float from store to store to store so that they can keep tabs on what's going on in the stores. So for example, we're opening our 3rd location in the Cleveland area on August 12th. And so we've hired a territory manager, and he will do 2 days in one store, 2 days in another store, and then 1 day in the 3rd store. And so that gives you the scale to be able to compensate that person appropriately. And also, it also creates the org chart that allows you to have your employees believe that there's something above being an oil changer, or there's something above being just a store manager, and that there is a path to owning your own business one day. And I think that that's important when it comes to creating the culture of hiring. So to get to your to very pointedly answer your question, we utilize Facebook mostly for hiring. Facebook as a tool allows you to spend very little money to put your classified ad in front of qualified people who tell what their experience is very quickly. And whereas Indeed might cater towards admin employees, I have found that Facebook for the last 4 years has been the best tool bar none for hiring. Prior to that, we had used Craigslist quite a bit, and because that is the level of employees that we hire. You know, we are hiring people that are, you know, they have an inherent passion for the job, in terms of they're mostly car people. So it's like, you know, it's not as difficult as hiring kitchen staff. I've owned a pizzeria in the past as a pet business, and there's nothing more difficult than trying to hire for a staff who will leave you for another pizzeria that gives them a 10 cents raise.
Right.
So, in our space, with this rise in inflation and this rise in wages, we've continued to be able to hire people for below market rates, because of one, people like to do work that they enjoy doing, right? So we compete with Sheetz for labor, and Wawa and Royal Farms, and for you people out in the Houston area and in Texas, the Buc-ee's and the racetracks and the QTs of the world. So when they're offering $18 an hour for someone to sit behind a cash register, that's a difficult thing to compete with, unless you're selling something that's a little bit different. And in our instance, it's the actual you know, being around the cars, being around automotive, not needing certifications in order to get into this business, right? We're not hiring ASC certified mechanics. We're not hiring people with, you know, these technical degrees. So it does open up the labor pool quite a bit, because the only thing we're doing is oil changes. And so that's been kind of a pain point for some of our competitors, who are all of a sudden dipping into brakes and tires and all these other things that are much higher liability services. They need to hire more qualified people. And then you run into this conundrum where, okay, well, I hire someone less qualified, and then I risk them, you know, messing up someone's car, or even worse, the customer getting into an accident and getting hurt. Or do we overpay for a more qualified person so we can sleep at night knowing that the job is getting done, and just grab that little bit of extra revenue by doing higher ticket average items? So the fact that the only thing we do is oil changes means that we get really good at what we do, and you don't need, you know, qualifications or certifications in order to do that. So I hope that answers your question, David.
Yeah, it does. The second question doesn't really have anything to do with oil changes, but how long were you at Merrill Lynch? Because I worked there for 20 years.
I was in the Chris Cunningham office in Columbia, Maryland, for a very short period of time in the FA program.
Yep. Okay, I was one of the specialists. So does the name Chuck Visconage ring a bell?
It does not. It does not.
Okay. Yeah, I was one of the estate planning specialists. So Chucky V was he was out in Maryland for us. So I didn't know if you happened to know him.
No, Merrill Lynch was my shortest stint of all of the TD, Ameritrade, and T. Rowe Price. I put in the most time. Merrill Lynch was a very, very short stay.
Yeah. Okay. When you mentioned Merrill Lynch, I was like, what? and Chris had mentioned that before, but I kind of forgotten about it. So, all right, that's all I have for this week.
Sure.
Yeah. Costa, the item you brought up about the general repair, or, you know, try and do everything for everyone model versus oil change only. I think back to Brandon in the Phoenix market on our call about 3 or 4 weeks ago. and then attending the Discovery Day. And the fact that he started out as a mechanic, and then I had an opportunity to purchase a general repair facility. He's got about 4,000 square feet. And I think he likes the business, but he had an opportunity to buy an independent oil change facility about a mile from his general repair location. And he was just saying on the call that he wishes he had 10 of the oil change locations based on how much easier it is for him to run. I think in many ways, less liability. His, techs, he's paying $35, $40, $45 an hour in general repair, versus much, much lower salaries for the techs in his oil change facility. And then, of course, liability and chain of custody, I think, is a lot more simple. So anyway, it's interesting to have him on these calls. The other thing that he had an advantage of, and this is something, Costa, you could talk more about, is the ability to create these referral programs with some of these general repair facilities, where when you service a vehicle and do an oil change, we do an 18-point inspection. Is if there is something that needs adjustment or fixing, if you have a good partner, you can refer them to that partner and have a quid pro quo going with them, where general repair would then refer the oil changes to you, because I think for most of those shops, it's a lot more expensive for them to do an oil change. The supplies are a lot more, and so they'll refer it back to you.
Yeah, so what Michael's mentioning is we typically will find a local shop when we open up a new store and enter into a relationship with them, where we send them non-oil change related services, because especially these days, these past 9 months, general auto repair uses oil changes as a loss leader. So they're typically not making money on oil changes. So they're more than happy to send us oil changes. And because we're a volume business and we're underneath the cars, and we have the ability to spot other issues, we can refer without any kind of skepticism or cynicism that we're trying to get a secondary sale. And so that just lends more credibility to our business if we're referring someone to someone else for something that we can't make any money on. So it's a good way of getting some extra oil changes, as well as gaining credibility with the customers as they come through.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back, do round robin. Jan, Breck, I don't know if anything came up while we were talking. Anything else?
No, sir, not right now. She's taking a few notes. That way we'll have whenever we come visit y'all.
Okay, great. Shatoya?
When you were talking about liability, I was wondering what kind of insurance is needed for this type of business as compared to other places that do more like invasive things on cars.
Yeah, that's a good question, Shatoya. Your lease will dictate whether you have to have building coverage, which is that's like a personal property coverage. But then when it comes to the general liability policy you'll have, that'll generally dictate what happens in between the doors. And so we've gotten to the point where we've been able to raise our deductible to lower our premium, because we have just so few incidents. But what it comes down to is the scope of your liability is just much more when you do all of these other things, because there are other components that are more expensive. So if you blow an engine, because that is the worst case scenario in our business, right? Is if the drain plug falls out and the oil runs out of the car and then the engine seizes, you have to replace the engine. Barring it being a Porsche or a Ferrari or something that is going to be overwhelmingly expensive, you can swap an engine in the majority of cars on the road for less than $5,000, which means that you can carry a liability insurance that's just much less than having to replace transmission, having to replace an axle, having to replace all of these other things that might be more expensive if you mess them up, and then mess them up more frequently, right? So insurance often they don't want your premium's going to be typically 3 or 4 times your loss run. So if your loss run is $30,000, then they're most likely going to make you have $100,000 premium, and that's an expensive policy. But if when you're first starting out, your insurance policy can be anywhere depending on what you choose for your premium. And don't quote me on this because it's probably going to vary state to state since insurance is largely state regulated. But for a single store, we've seen some of our franchisees insurance be less than $1,000 a month for their general liability. We're not keeping vehicles overnight, so that's an added aspect of it as well. When you're doing general repair and the car stays inside the building, then you need to have coverage that protects the vehicle if the building burns down and ruins the vehicle. Then you have to have coverage for personal property inside the vehicle in case someone was driving around with a computer in the back seat, or their great Grammy's ashes and things like that. So because everything happens at the point of sale, the customer there's just less liability involved because the car doesn't stay for long periods of time, and the scope of what can be damaged is limited.
Thank you.
Yeah. Costa, tying into that, I think it could be interesting for the group to learn a little about the ecosystem that you use. I've been very impressed by that, and I think that ties into reducing your liability based on what you set up.
Yeah, there's a lot of different points of protection for us, which there's a lot of quality assurance involved with our system. And so what Michael's talking about, our ecosystem, is just the call outs that happen during the service so that the employees know where they are each step of the way. And because our customers stay inside their vehicle and don't get shuffled off into a waiting room where they don't see what's happening to their vehicle, they can hear the call outs happen. So there's no chance of being accused of not doing something, such as not changing the filter, or not doing any of the services involved, the courtesy services. So the ecosystem is just a series of calling out what's happening as it's happening, and letting the other person know. We have streamlined our labor pool, our labor overhead rather, and we are able to service larger numbers of vehicles with less employees. So if anyone's ever driven by one of our competitors and seen 7 guys standing around and 2 guys actually doing the work, we've pretty much eliminated a lot of that extra standing around by having the manager be more involved with the process. We're not compartmentalizing different parts of the process, like checking people out and guiding people in. So we've been able to put together a system that, one, has the precautions in place to make sure that everything's being checked properly, but 2, also getting the job done fast enough to be able to service high volumes of vehicles.
Yeah. Thank you. Shatoya, any other questions?
No, that was the only one I had.
Okay. All right. John?
Yes, I had a follow-up question. Do you have like recommended insurance companies that you're already dealing with?
Our real estate partner is working on a relationship with to roll out a national insurance platform. But I largely do believe that franchisees are business owners, and so we don't mandate a lot of things. This is not like some franchise systems where you're beholden to every single thing that they tell you to do. We don't mandate oil companies. We don't mandate filter companies. Now, we'll lead you to water, and I largely do believe that franchising is paint by numbers. And so we do have processes that have worked for us, and obviously you have to protect the brand and the brand equity. And So there are procedures in place for that, but something like insurance, we're not gonna mandate, but we personally, corporately use a company that is owned by Liberty Mutual called AutoWorks. And, they are specific to auto related claims, which is nice because you don't want to, I was with Erie Insurance for a long time, and I actually left them because, there were some people trying to, I would say, I would say try to scam us. Especially there was an uptick in this during COVID in March, April of 2020, where people were coming in and saying that they had pre-existing problems with their car, but then trying to blame it on us. And so back in 2014, when I used Erie, I would voice my concerns about someone trying to maybe get one over on us. Erie would often just rubber stamp the claim and pay it out. And that would always bother me. Whereas our insurance adjusters with AutoWorks, they have a background in automotive, so they can tell when someone's just trying to get a quick claim submitted. And so that's been good. And there's a handful of other providers out there that do have that auto background. Another one that I know of is Intrepid Direct, and they're used by a lot of quick lubes. But we're a volume business, so we do a lot of vehicles. And so if you do 100,000 vehicles and you blow up one engine, that's what, a 0.01% failure rate, but that 0.01 can impact the insurance premiums if you don't have a good relationship and you don't have a company that understands that. So we can certainly help with that, trying to find someone local that has that experience.
Right. And Costa, that's not a common thing though, in your business. I know we've never talked about it much, but for you specifically, engines blowing up, correct?
No, we had 2 claims in 2021, and one was property damage from that was a attempted break-in, and then the other one was service related. So we have a lot of procedures in place, and we train our managers to resolve issues at the store level before it even gets to the point of having to submit a claim, because there's a lot of you'd have to skip a lot of procedural things for it to get to the point where someone's engine is damaged by our service.
On the the ecosystem, you're good with the weight of the oil, the type of oil, and the customer knows that. So I just wanted to bring that up. David, any other questions for Costa? Okay, he's gone on mute. Well, I'm going to open it up, and if there's anyone else that, you got it. Oh, okay, Jay, you have a question?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. So he just said something about manager training. How does manager training work?
So as it relates to the franchises, rather than our internal, Michael, you can share our new hire sheet with anybody you'd like if you have that PDF.
I do.
But as far as the franchise training is, when the store is getting ready to open, so we do franchisee training every month, and we do it the same week as Discovery Day. So it's the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Discovery Day, and either operator, GM, the owner, someone has to represent the franchise at training, and we'll do an extensive training, both in store and classroom training. From there, you can always send someone to our training because we hold it on a monthly basis. But what most of the time happens is once you have someone who's trained through our training, that gives you the ability to train at your store in perpetuity. So we actually have Michael Connor's store is opening on the 19th, and he's sending, even though he's already come to training a couple months ago, he's sending through some of his people for the August training. So we go through best practices. We go through, what Michael will share with you, our new hire checklist, which, if we believe that if you go through this checklist, by the end of the day, you should be proficient at the basic functions within the store. Our manager's responsibility, one of the reasons why I looked at Quick Lubes in the first place when I was sitting at my desk at T. Rowe Price was the stores are run by the other employees during the manager's day off. And so it was important to me that there be continuity if a manager quit. And so any employee should be able to intermittently run the business, because from a management perspective, there's not a lot to it other than their biggest responsibility is customer management. And when you get to the point where you have multiple stores, then you have a second layer of that, because you can hire the territory manager. And then, of course, we have a back office now. So we even have the ability, if it needs to be bumped up even further than the store level, we can take the call here at the office. And then in the most rare circumstances, and I haven't had to do this in years, I'll take the call as the owner of the business. But the manager role is not so complex that we haven't internally replaced managers prior. And that's kind of one of the allures of what brought me into the business in the first place. The way that I've said it on previous calls is I was looking at non-skilled manager centric businesses. So I'll use the pizzeria as an example, because I've owned a pizzeria. If your pizza maker calls out, unless you go in to make the pizzas, you got to close down. You can't just let anybody make a pizza, because there's health risks at hand and also quality risks at hand. Whereas we have a non-perishable product and service that can be done by any employee in the store. And so at least intermittently, you can have it be run by a non-manager. And that was important to me, to be able to, in those instances where a manager does leave, have continuity of the store while we look to replace them.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll open it up if anyone has a question for Costa.
I do have one more question. Can you talk a little bit about your fleet program?
Yeah, so fleets are one of the best ways to eliminate the ramp-up period that is inherent to automotive businesses. So I've talked about food a lot, specifically pizza, so I'll do it again. When you make the best pizza in town, people can eat there on the grand opening. They can also eat there 4 more times that week. When we have a grand opening, no matter how good of a job we do, and we do a great job, those cars don't come back for another 3 months. And so one of the easiest ways to eliminate that ramp up period, which seems to be 9 to 12 months, is to get fleet accounts. Now, we don't have the presence nationally at the moment to get involved with companies like Enterprise or WEX, even though on an individual basis, you certainly can join those programs. I found that the juice is not worth the squeeze when it comes to Enterprise at the moment. And so corporately, we don't have an Enterprise account. I have franchisees that plan on having an Enterprise account. But what fleet for us means is having managers. This is another role of the managers typically, and then we outsource it to our back office to make the connection. Our managers will target cars as they drive by, because everybody puts their business information on their commercial vehicles now. So if you see Joe Schmo's HVAC, if you see, Michael's Plumbing, if you see all these cars driving by your store on a regular basis, then reaching out to them and offering them discounted oil changes at net 30 terms is a very easy way to quickly gain new customers. And so we have a wealth of local fleets that are sourced by the manager level. at the store level. And those really do help offset the cost of the business. And so in Dillsburg, for example, we have a fleet called Low Bar, which is a large construction company. They have over 300 vehicles, from sales vehicles to heavy duty trucks. They essentially pay our bills, and then the retail customers are just the cherry on top after them, because they're such a reliable customer of ours now. And they were sourced by our manager. They, we just saw the Low Bar cars driving by Route 15 so frequently. We were like, hey, let's give them a call, because they don't want to be in a Midas or a Meineke where the car is gone for 4 or 5 hours, especially if you're a three truck operation. You need those trucks to be out there on the road making money, not in a shop all day or a couple days or whatever it may be. So fleets are a great way. We have a pretty extensive fleet training. We have a script that we provide to our franchisees that have worked for us for approaching fleets via phone call, approaching them via email. And so we have a pretty well formulated approach to fleet accounts.
Yeah, good. Great. Costa, thank you. If there aren't any more questions, I guess we'll let you go. Maybe one last time, in any other questions? Good. Well, David and John, I know I haven't been working with you, but I just wanted to reiterate, we do have Discovery Days coming up once a month. I think Breck and Jay, I know you're scheduled for our August one, which is 17th, 18th, and arrive in Baltimore by 4 p.m. and then the following day, the 18th. And they generally run on Wednesdays and Thursdays. We run the workshop until about 1:45 Eastern, and then we have a shuttle that goes back to the airport, and any flight out after 4:30 or 5 works well. And that, Chris, if you're working with Chris, he can get those details to you and send you a copy of the agenda. And Shatoya, I guess you and I will talk, at some point here. Hopefully you can make August or September. And then I think, we still have certain things. Some of us, I usually will run through the territory call after this, and then we can also do an initial review on the franchise disclosure document. So anyway, my clients I'm working with, I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Costa, thank you for doing these calls. I think they're very helpful. I do want to mention that they are recorded. There are some, and I hear this a lot from folks that I work with now, as they've gone into the franchise portal on the site and they've listened to some of the other recordings that we have. So those can be interesting. And then also YouTube. Costa is very good about getting out there and promoting the brand. And so I hear often of folks listening to some of his podcasts on YouTube. So, one last thing I want to mention. Costa is very humble about this, but I have spoken to you about the National Oil and Lube News magazine that publishes pretty much everything about auto lube, oil change. And Costa was awarded runner-up operator of the year last year in 2021 out of the whole US. So anyway, I wanted to mention that. Okay.
Thanks, Michael. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Hey, congratulations, Costa.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you for joining us. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
All right, thanks.
Bye.